Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from deltacx.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy. We do projects, training, and consulting. And welcome to the part 2 of last week's episode. So this is episode 21 of Think Out Loud. You can find it in the Think Out Loud playlist on the Delta CX YouTube channel, where of course I hope you will please subscribe. So last week was episode 20. If you missed it, I'm going to give you the short rundown of what we did and what we talked about so that we can pick up where we left off last week. But first, as always, I want to thank everybody who is donating to the YouTube channel by clicking join on the memberships. These are people and some other people donating at the what I call the junior and mid-level and senior low ego action hero levels. And thank you for that. Thank you for keeping me in streaming software and delicious chocolate chips, which I definitely ate today. Hello, Ian. So quick reminder of what we did last week. Hi, Manuel. Good to see you. Not that it's not good to see you too, Ian. So what we did last week in the Think Out Loud episode 20 for DVC was I introduced you to a real thing called the Disney Vacation Club, DVC for us insiders. And I showed some of their website, and we talked about the complexity of the timeshare system. So you got some foundational domain knowledge, and we talked about how their online booking had a lot of awkward moments. It seems to be only really relevant to one or two use cases and probably misses a lot of who their audience is. So now we also had the further adventure that I am the user. I am a member of the Disney Vacation Club. I am in the timeshare system. So we also talked about how do we make sure that I am not the user? How do we make sure that I use the domain knowledge I have for good and I don't slip into any of the, well, I'm the user and I need this kind of stuff. So that was episode 20. Go back and check that out. If you missed it, we're going to pick up where we left off today. So last week we got foundational domain knowledge. If you have any questions, ask them here. I am monitoring the chat on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and Twitter. And then after we're finished with our research plan, and of course this is fake, this is just a sample project so you can see how I approach projects and how I think. Hello, Nadu. Then we'll get to do some designing. And good morning, Whitney. Always good to see all of the low ego action heroes. And Pier Mario, who is roughly 15 feet to my left. Hello. Or good night. Yeah, it's 6:30 p.m. here. I've got lots of calls after this, so not ready for good night yet, but sounds good. All right, so let's flip over to my browser and just give everybody a reminder of where we left off. Let's see if I can press the right button today. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So here's me, the optional tip jar, the chat room, which is the way I see it, and my giant browser window. I am not in a private browser this week, which means you get to see actually my regular browser, which of course you'll notice has a theme of Disney World, Florida, because I am a super fan. Steph says, hi, it's 35 degrees. I hope you're all hydrated. It's a mess. Yeah, it's pretty hot here too, Steph. Everybody drink your water. As usual, I am drinking watered down fruit juice and recommend it highly. Not sponsored. All right, so if you want to learn more about the Disney Vacation Club, just so you have some foundational and domain knowledge for our fake session, again, watch last week's episode 20 or check them out at disneyvacationclub.disney.go.com. Please note, I'm not trying to sell you a timeshare. I'm not trying to tell you you should buy a timeshare. This has nothing to do with timeshare sales. This has to do with CX and UX work. Hello, Sirocco, who I still insist on pronouncing Italianly, even though you said that's not how you pronounce it. Okay, so where we left off last week and where we'll pick up again today is in our generative research plan. We were looking at, imagine that Delta CX, my company, is being hired to help the lovely people at Disney Vacation Club make a much better web experience for booking. Now, we're just looking at desktop web in this case. And if we were to do some generative research, how would we start to plan that? So we started with the idea that we're going to do an hour contextual inquiry with people. That means we're going to ask them questions, have them do one or more tasks, and then ask them questions at the end. This would be remote. We don't have to sit next to anybody since this is a digital experience. It can be done remotely. I would put a larger team on this so we can get a lot of work done faster. So I said 2 lead researchers and 2 assistants. And by the way, if you want to, this is my Axure file, hashtag not sponsored. If you want to see the Axure file, I'll load it up at the end of the session. It is at VV number 3, letter R, letter N, number 9, .axshare, AXSHARE.com. So you can view my file from a web browser, and I'll upload it again once we're done. Thank you, Sirocco. Okay, so, and that will give you this page as well with more information. Time and budget, these are just my guesses. I'm pretending that I need to put a time and budget in because this is a potential client. What are we going to give to people at the end of the research? We're going to give them recordings of the research. Yes, I normally do share them with my client unless we are researching something where privacy would prohibit that. For example, if there's health-related information and people are going to talk about their health, we probably don't want to give them those recordings because of the personal information. But in this case, this is about vacations. Chances are we're not going to hear personal information, so we normally do share the recordings with the clients. We often do typologies or personas, but not always, so I wrote optional. We are going to want to come up with an overarching UX strategy for the booking tool or system or interface that this website would have. And usually for our clients, we do some sort of presentation showing the key things that we learned and our suggestions for them. Actionable, everybody, actionable suggestions. Then we talked about participant profile. We talked about how we probably just want to stick with current timeshare members. There are times where you want to research with people who are current customers and people who match the profiles but aren't current customers. So you get people who are from outside of the system and aren't kind of colored by how they use this system. But since I want to make sure that we're really speaking to the target audience, it might not make sense to talk to people with other types of timeshares because the DVC timeshare system, as we talked about last week, is a bit unique. And so it probably would be better to make sure we just talk to people who are in the DVC system, but we can talk to DVC newbies. There are some people who have just bought into the system today and aren't that familiar with the website, maybe haven't even booked their first vacation, because what you may or may not know is when you go to Disney World in Florida, many places that you go, there are little kiosks set up to try to sell you on the idea of buying into the timeshare system. So you might be on a vacation, you might be loving it so much you buy into the timeshare system, you've never been to the website. Hi, Aaron. Oh, thank you for being here. It's not the same without all of you joining live and watching it later in the archives. So we talked about finding English-speaking current customers. DVC focuses very much on America as their target audience, so these would be English speakers in America, but we talked about how we're open to people who are non-native English speakers. There are many people in America who are immigrants there and might be Disney fans and bought into the timeshare system. So we do want to interview people in English. The website is in English, but we don't mind if English is not the native language. The website has to make sense to everybody. Mix of people who are new to DVC and savvy. So we would use our screener survey to get a sense of when they bought into the DVC system, maybe how often they've been using their points. This is a points-based timeshare system. And that way we can use the screener survey to get a nice mix of people. We want to meet people with accessibility needs. Not only will that affect how they use the website, but it will affect how they book their hotel room, because not every room at DVC is going to be, in the DVC universe, is going to be accessible. For example, I often stay at the Old Key West Resort. We talked last week about all the different hotels Disney has. I think there are 11 or so hotels that you can stay at that have these DVC rooms, or they call them villas to sound fancy. And some of them have stairs, no elevators. So clearly not every room is going to be right for different accessibility needs. Some are very far away from the front desk and services. Some are close. So people with accessibility needs, don't forget them. Don't say you'll figure it out later. Don't say we'll sprinkle on a plug-in. Accessibility is like diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has to be baked in through the whole process. We don't sprinkle it on later. Now, the rule of thumb for generative research of this type is that we typically want to meet 8 to 12 people per target group. We ended up with 64 to 96 people. Again, learn more last week, and using a screener survey so that we find the right mix of people. Where we left off was, what are we going to ask these people? Aaron says, I heard a cool tip from a customer of ours in the Netherlands. They included a test screener where they had to answer out loud without providing a lot of time to Google search. You must speak Dutch to take this test. Please complete the following statement, XYZ. And they included a locally well-known or colloquial idiom and only provided the first half. Again, that could end up knocking out immigrants. And so you have to make sure, what are you trying to get here? Who are you trying to get here? Are you trying to knock out people who don't have a lot of local knowledge? That's one way to do it. See if they know a Dutch idiom or colloquialism. You could knock out immigrants, and that may or may not be what you intended to do. In our case, I do not want to knock out immigrants. So I think that, yeah, good point. Yeah, thank you. That's why we talk about critical thinking on this channel, because what you've written sounds good until you stop and say, wait a minute, what are the possible outcomes of this? Where could this go wrong? Where might this not match some of my research intentions? So I'm not going to give anybody a language test. I'm not going to tell anybody they have to record themselves speaking, because someone posted something in our Slack group the other day. And if you want to join our Slack group, it's totally free, deltacx.com/links. Come on over and join. Someone posted something about how you might want to be careful that your research participants are lemons if they're not good communicators. That's a giant middle finger to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. People have different communication styles, some because of immigration, language, nationality, some because of diagnosis, conditions, diseases, disabilities. So I have interviewed many people for whom English was not a strong language, and we still had an excellent interview with a really great participant. So be careful that you're not letting any of your biases or stereotypes creep in. We do not need to test people to see if they're going to be good communicators. It's more important that they fit this parameter, and if it takes them a little bit of more time to express themselves because they'd like to think about it, or they're trying to make sense of it in English, I want to give them that time. I want to hear them. And that to me is part of what makes good research. So be careful of some of those things you see going around. So, all right. So let's talk about, and this is where we have audience participation. So with, especially for those who joined last week and maybe feel a little bit more savvy about this project, or watched episode 20 during the week because it's in the archives, what are some questions we might want to ask before the task? Now remember, assume we've run a screener survey, so we don't have to ask them things like, how old are you? We probably asked that in the screener survey so that we can get a mix of people of different ages, some people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. So we don't need to ask people questions we already have the answer to in the survey if we believe the survey was probably honest and if we believe our question was written well. So what kinds of questions do we want to ask? Because typically the screener survey is, I ask the least number of questions I can to weed people in or out and to figure out which bucket they're falling into, if any. I'm usually not going to start to ask detailed questions about usage. I won't ask people how often they do something unless something about our bucket requires us to know how often they do something, just saying that as an example. I am also not an icebreaker question kind of person. I know a lot of programs and courses out there say, start with some icebreakers. Ask people, how was their most recent vacation? Or how was their holiday? You know, are you talking to someone after Easter? Ask them how their Easter was. And I say, again, critical thinking. This sounds good until we ask ourselves some critical thinking questions. What if they don't celebrate Easter? What if they had COVID over Easter? I don't think that we need to ask people these types of questions. To me, I can start asking them relevant, easy questions that ease us into the interview and hopefully create some of that rapport. I don't have to ask them about a vacation. Maybe they just got laid off and they can't afford a vacation. You know, like this is, okay, we're going to be talking about vacations. The whole thing is timeshares and vacations, but you know what I mean. You see a lot of advice that says, ask people about their recent vacation. No. I mean, in this case, yes, we're going to talk about vacations, but in general, no, because I don't know what anyone's life or situation is like. I don't know if they have money for a vacation, health for a vacation. You know, this can end up in an awkward place when you think you're building rapport or breaking the ice. Bram says, hey, Debbie, what if you know your target audience? Do you still do a screening? I always do a screening. Unless the client is doing the screening for me, which we've had done in the past, I always do a screening because I want to make sure that we're getting a good mix of people. If you don't screen first, you run the risk that if you're just inviting people as you find them, because that's usually the alternative, then you might end up with 6 white guys. And then you're like, where's everybody else? So the screener survey helps us get a whole bunch of survey responses, sometimes even hundreds, and then we could say, aha, we've got some men, we have some women, we have some people of other genders, we have people of different ages, we have people of different savviness, and now we can start to invite different people and make sure we have a nice spectrum of people. CJ says, favorite Disney character to build rapport, or maybe IP. That could be fun. You know, that if you want an icebreaker question, let's put it in. Again, not usually my style. I usually go right to the heart of things, but we could do that. We could say, before we get started, and remember, I'm typing questions right now. This is typically my first pass. I will typically come back for hours, if not days, and keep rereading these questions and keep improving them. So remember, just because we write a bunch of questions together today, we're not done. I am always reviewing them, and if I do have a team working with me, we're all reviewing them and working on making them better. So we could say, before we get started, I'm just curious, who is your favorite character from the Disney universe? And the fun thing about that, when CJ's got a good point, is that with Disney owning so many properties right now, it could be Star Wars, it could be Pixar, it could be Disney, it could be Muppets. Disney owns the Muppets. So, you know, probably Muppets for me, but yeah. All right, so interesting icebreaker question. And then now let's see, I might want to ask people. Now remember, we only want to ask, this is where we look back at our goals. Oh, we didn't write goals. Oh, boo, we forgot goals. I must be using a wacky template here. Let's take a quick moment here. And let's write some research goals. Always make sure you've written your goals and check them a zillion times before you write questions. And I want everybody to help me out on this one. So our goals are, what do we want to make sure we've learned by the end of this study? If at the end of this study, I look back and we haven't learned a mountain of stuff about our goals, we did the research badly in one or more ways. So let's think about some of the goals that we want to learn in the process of this research. Then we can start matching up questions that will answer those goals. And for those of you thinking about collaboration at real jobs, this is also where I tend to work with a larger team. I don't like the larger team to do the research or analyze the research. I don't believe in that. I don't believe everyone's a researcher. But I do believe getting people together early, asynchronously or in a meeting to work on questions, unanswered questions. It's great to bring in your product manager, your engineers, your stakeholders and say, what do you hope we learn from this study? What do you wish you knew about our target audience here? What unanswered questions do you have about people who are searching for available hotels or booking them on our site? And very often you will get interesting stuff from other people and you can include those in your goals. But since this is a fake project, we just have to come up with these goals ourselves. So I think one thing I would like to learn is kind of the task flow of vacation planning. What do they do first? What do they do next? So that's one thing I'd like to know. For example, where do they start? Do they start with, hey, the kids have Easter week off. Should we go back to Disney and use our timeshare? Or do they start some other way? What triggers the need or idea for a vacation that would eventually bring them to Disney? We might ask if they own other timeshares or tend to vacation in other places. Is Disney Vacation Club competing against anything? That's kind of a curious question. So are target users vacationing frequently, or I guess repeatedly, timeshare or not, in other places? So for example, oh yes, like for example, when I was little, every Christmas school break, we went down to see my evil, terrible grandmother. That was it. No matter what, that's where we were going, and we stayed with her and we hated it. But that's actually how we started going to Disney, because she was a 4-hour drive away and we were all like, wow, we hate this. We hate her. Let's do something else. And so we started going to Disney World, and that was an upgrade. So I wonder if people are sometimes thinking, ooh, you know, should we do this trip? Like, for example, I know some people who are addicted to cruises and they like to try to go on a cruise every year or every other year. Do they balance it? Do they do a cruise one year and a Disney timeshare thing the next year? I would love to learn more about this. Now, no, we're probing into people's behaviors. We're probing into decisions they make. We want to know how they make these decisions. So I again, a general research goal for me will be how users decide to use DVC points and or book a vacation at Walt Disney World, Florida. We learned last week that these points are mostly not used at Disney in California. Many of you have heard of Disneyland. In fact, just yesterday they celebrated, I think, their 65th anniversary of existing. So you can only use them at one hotel there. So these are mostly used in Florida. Could we end up with people who are using them in California? We could. Should we only look for people using them in Florida? Probably. Again, this will make more sense if you saw last week's show. So let's say that we're going to make sure they're using them at Walt Disney World in Florida. What are some other research goals? Anybody? Anything that you imagine that we work together and we're planning this research? What are some things you want to make sure that we learn? You don't have to come up with a great question. Just give me a general thing that you hope that we learn by the end of this research. By the end of this research, what should we know? What should we understand? What should we have details around? What should we be able to speak confidently to stakeholders and others when we want to be advocates for users and represent their needs and voices? What do we need to know? And what do we need to know to set up designers for success? Remember, if you ask a wacky question like, do you like Starbucks? I can't design based on whether or not they like Starbucks. So we want to make sure that we have some relevant goals and that we're going to learn these things so that we can set up, again, great research should set up our team or business or company for great strategy choices and business decisions. And it should set up designers and design teams for great designs, building the right thing for people's needs. Melanie says, where are the pain points in the experience? Okay, we can just say that generally for sure. Where are there pain points in the vacation planning experience? Now, why did I say vacation planning? Why didn't I say booking? Because if we think about the end-to-end customer journey, and I know this doesn't look good on white, so I'll take it off the screen, but I got to make a different version. But basically, we have to remember that there's that trigger. What makes them go, oh, maybe we should go to Disney? And then we've got them considering it. There's decisions. Then we've got, them maybe coming to the site to figure out which hotels have availability for what dates to see what they can do and if they have the right number of points. And then we have things that they do afterwards, follow through, booking, scrapping the idea. That means the vacation planning experience is a larger end-to-end journey than just booking. Booking is just a piece of the end-to-end journey. So remember, especially in generative research, exploratory research, discovery research, whatever you want to call it, we definitely want to think about the overall experience. For example, maybe a pain point is, and I'm totally making this up, is I always go with my brother and his family, and coordinating with them sucks. Now, your first gut reaction might be, what can I do about that? But ultimately, there could be something we do about that. What if we built collaboration tools into the booking? Maybe there is something we can do about that. So Melanie's right, but remember, let's not narrowly look at the booking experience. Let's make sure we're looking at that full end-to-end journey. What are some other goals? What are some other things we will want to learn? Let's see. We talked about how users decide to use points and book a vacation. What about other decision making processes, I'll just call it? For example, budget. Who's traveling? When are we going? Which hotel? Etc. There are lots of decisions to be made in a vacation like this. So I would imagine we want to get to learn some of that process. How do they decide these things? Who else is involved? Are there collaborators? Let's say, like, is there a final approval person or team, Final approval persons. Aaron says, where are they at physically when they're looking at this? Who's around them? This can help change assumptions about who's looking at this and when. Okay, so like, are they at their computer with a spouse, a partner, mom, brother, whatever, or is this happening maybe remotely? So that's kind of an interesting, where are each of the collaborators and how and where do they work together? Like, for example, when I plan things with some of my friends, we get into a Zoom meeting. We start sharing screens and talking about stuff because we don't live near each other. That's interesting to know. Bram says, how does Disney cater to guests with disabilities? I think you're asking me that in general. I don't think that is in the research goals, because that's all, we already know that. We don't have to ask the people that. They might not even know that. Disney does a lot, by the way. You can Google this. Disney does a lot to cater to guests with disabilities, both disabilities related to mobility, hearing, sight, emotional issues, mental health, autism, and all kinds of other conditions. So I think that's just Googleable. It's way too long. In fact, I think there's a 26-page PDF I mentioned last week you can Google for, which is like stuff Disney has and does just for families who have one or more autistic family members or traveling companions. So check that out. There's a lot of stuff in there that's really interesting. Pier Mario, who's sitting right near me, says, is there anything missing from the booking experience, something they find out later they need to arrange directly? Okay, so now here's a funny thing. It's a great question, and the mistake a lot of people make in research, especially when they're new to research and they're learning, is they write a question that says, what's missing from this experience, right? How many of you have seen that in a boot camp or online course or somebody's portfolio where they say, well, just ask people what's missing. Remember, people don't know what's missing. They only know that they're trying to accomplish a task. They might not have a sense of what's here and what's not here. But I think what Pier Mario might be hinting at is maybe our more savvy people have learned some things the hard way. And now they have, let's remember what Larry Marine talks about. And I know you can't see this on a white background. They now have tools, they have knowledge, they have workarounds. So I think Pier Mario is hinting towards what are some things the more savvy people know that we should build into the system so that everybody can get this right the first time. And remember, the answer there isn't more explanations. The answer there is knowledge design, which we'll talk about when we get there. Now I'm worried we're not even going to get to design today. I'm so sorry. But if we have to start with design next week, this will just be a little bit more of a slow motion project. You've all told me you want me to go through these research plans slowly, so let's do it. And if we don't get to design today, I apologize. I said we would, but we might not. So we want to know what's missing, but we're not going to ask them what's missing. But we are going to write what's missing from the experience, which is really what have more savvy or experienced travelers learned that they now use in their process. Tools, knowledge, workarounds. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So again, notice we're not saying to people, what's missing, which is a common crappy question. We're going to have to ask this in other ways, and it's probably more for the savvy travelers who've done the DVC vacation at least once and then learned their lesson about something. You know, oh my gosh, we were way too far from the restaurant. The room they gave us was so ridiculously far, we felt like we had to walk a mile to have breakfast. We're not going to do that again. Now that's knowledge that some people have that others won't. A lot of people envision a hotel and they envision it pretty easy to get to breakfast. But what you don't know about most of the Disney resorts, for especially for DVC, is that they are spread out over acres and acres of land, and they're done in like almost little, I don't know if you'd call it bungalow style, but it's like little clusters of rooms. And you might be really far with an outdoor walk, possibly in the rain, to the restaurant. That might be something people have learned. I don't want to be far from the restaurant. Don't want to walk in that rain. All right, great ideas. Anything else from anybody? Otherwise, let's get into some questions. Feel free to shoot me goals or questions we should ask people about this stuff. So I'm going to start going back to our questions. And again, later on, I might reword these. I might reorder them. I might add questions. I might remove them. This is just my first pass. So I might want to ask people, who else do you tend to travel with? So people might say, oh, sometimes it's just my partner and me. Oh, sometimes it's all of us with the kids too. So we need to learn who's in the traveling party. Sometimes I travel alone. Sometimes I travel with the Pier Mario. And that means different stuff. If I'm traveling alone, I'm not asking him what he thinks of the idea. different behaviors. So we might end up having a couple of different tasks or task analyses or task flows based on some of the parameters of what's going on for people's realities. You know, a lot of times when you go through a boot camp or an online course or something like that, they make it seem like talk to a few people, find out what they do, draw a customer journey map. But think about this. Start to imagine, use your critical thinking. How many different customer journey maps could we end up with? The solo traveler who doesn't have to ask anybody what they think. The couple or two people traveling together, a romantic couple, two friends traveling together. Maybe they're asking each other what they think. The family. The family may or may not involve the kids in some decisions, depending upon their ages or personalities. What about multiple families traveling together? Disney loves to cater to big families coming together. You know, 8 people, 20 people, and they all get matching shirts. Whitney says, are you traveling with a group? If yes, small or large? Yeah, so I think ultimately, who else do you tend to travel with is a good question. We can always ask some follow-up questions when we hear their answer. They might say, oh yeah, sometimes it's just me and my partner, and we leave the kids with grandma, and sometimes it's me and partner and our 3 kids. Okay, now we've got possibly 2 different tasks that we're going to need to follow because we can't just say something like, is your process different when you bring the kids? People don't think in terms of this is my process. You know, that's very clinical. And so we're going to have to find other ways to get at that information, which again is part of why research is not easy. You can't just call somebody up and go, how do you book a Disney Vacation Club thing? Okay, thanks, bye. So who else do you tend to travel with? How is the budget decided? And I'll put in as a possible follow-up question, who decides the budget? If they don't mention who, I will ask them, who decides the budget? They might say, oh, our parents like to treat us every other year. They decide the budget. Oh, it's really me and my partner. You know, we save for 2 years to go to Disney. We decide the budget. So how is the budget decided? They might mention who. If not, I've got a reminder to myself to ask the follow-up question to make sure I find out who's involved in the budgeting. Let's see. Okay, so we've talked about budget. We've talked about, now I go back to my goals and I say, am I starting to write questions that will get my goals met or exceeded? When, which hotel, final approval person? Okay. Is there one person in your traveling party who is the final decision maker? Again, I might change that question later, but it'll be curious to know. They might say, oh yeah, my wife tends to decide everything, or oh yeah, it's really my dad. My dad budgets for it, so he wants to make all the decisions. Or we could learn it's more democratic. Aaron says, what would be a good way to help users assess if they're prone to the Abilene paradox, preventing group mistakes in planning due to groupthink or not appropriately discussing or finding out the real thoughts or feelings of the group? Okay, so we might ask, and I might reorder this question, and I might even put it at the end. Let's try putting it at the end after they've done the task, because you don't want to ask anything before the task that could color how they do the task. So let's try Aaron's question at the end. As I write it, tell me if it could be better. Let's work together and see if you can think of a better way to phrase this that gets at Aaron's question. Tell me about a time when you planned a trip with a group / your family, whatever they've said. So choose whichever one they've said. And something, and it could be something went wrong, or it could be, it turned out you didn't fully understand what some people needed or preferred. Now, right now, this question is too long. It's kind of junky, but I'll write it anyway, knowing that this is my first pass. This is not the last time I'm going to look at these questions and improve them and fix them. So I think I would ask them for maybe 1 or 2 stories about a time when they planned something and it ended up not working out for 1 or more people because we didn't fully understand some of the things people needed. I certainly have had that happen to me. My previous boyfriend, I took him to Disney World once, and he did not have the best time. It was a little bit hotter than he could stand, so it was probably the wrong time of year, and it was more walking than he was prepared for. And I'm not too sure what I could have done about that, but I definitely assumed incorrectly that the temperature was going to be okay and the amount of walking was going to be okay. Melanie says, you went along with a decision that you didn't agree with. Yeah, that's like another part of the question is you went with what other people wanted, but it wasn't what you wanted. How did that go? So maybe there's tell me about a time when you planned a trip with a group or your family and you went along with something you didn't want or agree with. This is a statement, not a question. But yeah, these are interesting ideas for after the task. We don't want to color the task by bringing people back to a negative time. I want to make sure I ask them easy questions first, watch some of their vacation planning and booking tasks, and then ask them some questions at the end when I'm confident that what I ask them is not going to color how they do the task. Pier Mario says, do you usually do all your research before starting the booking process and have the information handy, or do you browse other Disney sites? So Pier Mario is kind of falling into a little bit of a trap here. He's right. We want to know this, and I'm going to add it to goals, but I wouldn't ask that question that way. So let's add it to goals. What research do people do before, during, or after booking? And again, that could be research within Disney websites or outside of Disney websites, but we can't ask them that because, first of all, it's an or question, and there's a rainbow of answers, and we don't want to accidentally lock people into the false choice of do you do this or do you do that? So that is a false choice, and we don't want to lock people into that. So, yeah, that's okay, honey. You'll be fine. You're newbie along with everybody else. So what do we really want to know here? We want to know how they do that. Now, the best way to learn that is to make it part of the task. The task could be, you're considering your next vacation. Notice I didn't say Disney vacation. I'm just going to say vacation. Please share your screen and show me where you start. Now I'm going to be walking with them through the process, having them show me every step. And that's going to include various websites. They might say, before, I was thinking about booking at this hotel, but I think I want to read some reviews first. Or I was thinking about booking at this hotel, but I'm going to go post to a discussion forum. Discussion forums are still very popular for DVC fans and Disney fans. Let's see what they do. They might, who knows what they're going to do? Let's not have too many assumptions. We just know that we're going to see tasks. We're going to see the same task done differently by probably most people. We might also make sure they show collaboration moments, like when would you contact or speak to another person or persons for input, opinions, or decisions. Hello, Glenn. Yeah, we're not going to get to design today. Sorry, everybody. We'll start it next week. Sorry, I promised design and we're not doing it. So ultimately, the observational part is we want to see as much of that end-to-end customer journey. That means we start them with the moment that they're thinking about a vacation to see what they do. For all I know, their first step is to log into online banking and see how much money they have in their savings account. We don't know, but we want to know, and we're open to anything. And someone might say, first I log into my online banking and I check my savings balance, but I really don't want to do that with my screen shared. That's okay. We don't make them. You never make somebody do something. We say, that's fine. I'll just make a note that that's what you normally would do. What would you do next? Move right along. Okay, I have enough money to take the vacation. What do they do next? Or I have a certain amount of money. Which vacation can I afford? So again, we just want to see as much of their natural process as possible. But remember, this kind of vacation planning normally doesn't happen in one sitting. Chances are they're not sitting down, thinking about a Disney vacation, going to the website and booking it. I bet some percentage of people do that, but I would bet, and again, I'm guessing, that some percentage of people who do that have already made a number of decisions up front. They decided who's going. They decided what the budget is. Maybe they previously checked out how many points they had. So sometimes we ask people, what steps have you, once they show me the first step, what steps have you taken before this? What steps do you normally take before this? Oh yeah, before this, I normally log into the timeshare website and make sure how many points I have, and I log into my online banking to make sure I've got the money for the vacation. Boom. Sirocco says, if people travel, say with a spouse, would you try to interview both parties? Is it enough to just interview people who fit in that bucket? Yeah, I mean, the problem is that if we try to say like, okay, I'm going to interview this person and then I'm going to interview the person they're married to, are you trying to catch them saying different things? Are you trying to see if they each give different parts of the puzzle? One thing you can do, though this is not always a great way, is sometimes you can interview the couple together if they really, really do function as a team and they work very closely together on this and they're very equal about it. You could interview them as a team. I've interviewed a couple of teams when we did some research a few years ago on Etsy sellers. We had a couple of Etsy sellers who work extremely closely with someone else. We had a father-daughter crafting team. We had a husband-wife crafting team. They wanted to be interviewed together because they didn't really see just one of them as the Etsy seller. They saw both of them. So that's a maybe, but I'm not sure I would interview them separately. That's another hour and all that stuff. Aaron says, do you think it would be appropriate to try and include that in the screener without risking coloring their expectations? Like, you may be asked to share your screen during this test. You blah, blah, blah. That might exclude people. Yeah, so first of all, it's not a test. Never tell people this is a test. We don't want them to feel like they're being tested. But yes, I do include in the screener survey that in order to be part of this session, we are going to ask them to share their screen and walk us through how they plan vacations. You know, something general like that. I don't tell them what's in my goals. I tell them something very high level and generic so that I'm not coloring this too much. You know, you will need to spend an hour with us in a Zoom call. We will ask you to share your screen and show how you plan vacations. And that way we've set people up for the idea that we're going to watch that, but that we're not going to ask them something else. Yeah, thank you. So that would be some of the planning that I would do. But ultimately, we really want to get that task, and we want to do that task analysis. And if you're unfamiliar with task analysis, we've got a pile of videos about it here on the YouTube channel. Just go to the Delta CX YouTube channel. Of course, please subscribe and check out our playlist called Micro Lessons. You can also go to YouTube and type in Delta CX Task analysis, and I think you'll get 4 or so videos. And so we've got a whole technique that we use and that we teach here, and basically it has to do with, it's like better than a customer journey map, better than jobs to be done. And the idea is that you would be looking at the mapping out this task, and then once it's mapped out with some very interesting parameters that we teach you about, then you would be mapping out what would this look like if it were optimized? What would this flow or task or process look like if we made it better, faster, easier, cheaper, more intuitive, whatever it is. And so that would be ultimately the way that I would want to do this. So in fact, let me add to my artifacts. Chances are we would have some task analysis and optimized task flows. Because there might be multiple ones. Again, we may or may not see that people who travel with different people behave differently, or we might find that they do a lot of the same things and the variations are just slight, and we can put it all in one map. All right, we've only got about 10 minutes left. So again, I apologize that we didn't get to design today, but definitely next week. Any other questions? And again, we always ask follow-up questions as we go where we feel like we want to know more. But let's take a look at our goals. If you're not sure if you're done with your questions, take a look at your goals. Do your questions answer the goals? Task flow vacation planning, yes. Are target users vacationing repeatedly in other places? Okay. That could be a good, maybe a late question. Maybe an early question, because that could speak to some of their process. No, I'm going to ask it late. Let's see. No, maybe early. Sorry, I haven't decided, but I'm going to put it early and I might move it later. So, are you a member of other timeshare systems? Are there vacation destinations other than Walt Disney World that you tend to travel to repeatedly? Now notice those are 2 separate questions. A newbie mistake here would be, are you a member of other timeshare systems, or are there vacation spots you tend to go to over and over? That's what we call a double barrel question. You have 2 questions asked as one. They're totally separate questions. So make sure where you have totally separate questions, you ask them as totally separate questions. Are you a member of other timeshare systems? Yes, no. We don't need to know too much about that. We can just know maybe who. Or we could, maybe a possible follow-up question is, how often do you vacation through that system? Are there other vacation destinations other that you tend to travel with repeatedly? Okay, let's go back to our goals and see what else we're missing. How do users decide to use their points and book a vacation? I'm hoping we'll see that in the task. I'm hoping at some point we will see in the task, let's write here, decisions about timeshare points. So now these are notes to myself. If I don't see people talking about these after they go through their task, I might ask them about them. Hey, at what point, hey, do you ever do this? Or at what point do you do, well, you can't say at what point do you do this because that assumes they do it. So it might be, do you do this? Well, it depends. So sometimes you just gotta improvise. Where are each of the collaborators and how do they work together? Okay, we talked about who else do you travel with? How is the budget decided? Is there one person in your traveling party who's the final decision maker? And when you are collaborating with others on vacation planning, where is this done? So this would be online, remote, something else. Hi, Dr. King. You could prompt in the before task and then based on their answers, more in-depth questions after. Also true. Thank you for that. Where are the pain points in the vacation planning experience? Remember, we're going to mostly learn that from watching the task. When we see them bounce all over the place, well, now I have to check if this resort is available. Oh, it's not available. These ones are available. I don't know which ones my wife likes. Let me go check with her. Okay, hold on. She likes this one. Let me check with my mother-in-law. Oh, she wants this one. You know, that we could end up finding the pain point. The idea is you don't ask people their pain points, you see their pain points. That's the beauty of observational research. I mean, you can ask somebody, a great question is always, how could this process have been improved? So that's always a great question. And I'm going to make a note that says, keep asking. Why did I write that? Because if I say, how could this process be improved? Someone might say, gee, I wish I understood earlier how many points I had available because I had my heart set on this hotel for this time. And it turned out I didn't have enough points and I couldn't go. Now, some people stop there. They asked a question, they got an answer, they moved to the next question. Not me. When it comes to how could this be improved, these are a lot of our pain points. So I will find ways to keep asking that. Is there something else about the process that could have been improved? Oh yeah, it was really hard to coordinate things because my mother-in-law is so particular, and if we don't do what she likes, okay. What about any other ways that you think this could have been improved? Yeah, you know, I really didn't understand which hotels were close to. So again, keep looking for that, and I will usually keep doing cycles of how else could this be improved until someone says, I think that's it. And I go, okay. But sometimes they'll give me 8 things. Sometimes they give me 1 thing. Sometimes they give me 3 things. Don't stop with a question like this. Don't stop just because you have one answer. You want all the answers. These are the pain points. This is what's missing. Remember, if someone says, I really didn't understand how many vacation points I had until I was really farther in the process, that's what's missing. They didn't understand something earlier. That's also knowledge. It's a lack of knowledge, but it's something the system knows. So you don't have to ask people what's missing. You don't have to ask people what should happen here. If you just ask people how things could be improved, you're going to get some great perspectives. Now, sometimes they say something outlandish. You know, aliens should have landed on my desk and told me exactly what to do. You know, thank you, ma'am. I'll make a note of that. But these are the questions. These are the watching the task, the asking about the improvements. These tell us very often the most. Where are the pain points? What's missing? What have more savvy or experienced travelers learned that they now use in their process? Okay, another good question for the end now that they've gone through their tasks. Is there anything you do in your process now that... And I'm going to write a crappy question, and I'll technically come back another time and make it better. But I just want to get it out of my head before I forget it. Is there anything you do in your process now that you do because you learned something the hard way? There's probably a shorter, more concise way to say that, but that's going to tell us a little bit about our savvy travelers. And, you know, we could even ask this to our not savvy travelers, because maybe they might say, oh, you know what? I used to be a member in a different timeshare system, and there was this one time where we found out we couldn't eat breakfast and blah, blah, blah. Now I make sure in the Disney timeshare system that I do this breakfast thing. Maybe they learned something from something else. And that is fine. We still want to know that. That's a good answer to the question. Don't block out good answers because they didn't learn it in the Disney system. These are still really important. Yes, Sirocco says the aliens are coming. Okay, so let's look back at our goals, pain points missing, savvy travelers learned. What do people do before, during, and after booking? Okay, so we might have a question of, we're going to run a little late today. I want to get through this so that next week we're definitely designing. After you finalize the booking, what do you do after that? Now, I know from having domain knowledge that very often after the booking, depending upon when you've done the booking, you start doing other stuff. You start making dining reservations. You start booking spa treatments. You might book a golf course. You might buy your flights. Maybe you make sure you got your hotel, then you buy your flights. So this could be cycles of, this could be another one that goes in cycles. Like, you know, what do you do after the booking? Oh, well, first I try to see if I can get the best restaurants before they're all booked up. Okay, what else do you do after booking? Oh, well, now that we've got our hotel locked up, we'll probably buy our flights. Okay, what else do you do after the booking? Oh, you know what? I'm going to send a message to my sister and let her know that we got the booking. Okay, like, now, I'm making these up. I'm totally making these up, but you can almost start to imagine. Now, we're many steps ahead of ourselves here. We're jumping into solutions, but you can almost imagine how the information we get from research, when brought all together, which we call synthesis, can eventually lead us to say something like, gee, well, at the end of the booking process, how about a share button that says, send this to my sister, send this to my collaborators, something like that. So, you know, does it do that now? I haven't seen that. Maybe it does. I haven't booked on DVC in a long time because, hey, pandemic. So, yeah. And then there's always the magic one question, which some of you have heard about. At the end, we normally ask something like, if you had a magic wand and could create anything related to your vacation planning, what would you change? Or what would you do? Or something like that. Again, it's a variation of how can this be improved, but it tends to spark some fresh things. Or sometimes they'll say, I think I already told you everything. And you go, okay, thank you so much. Any last thoughts or questions? Because we're running late and I want to wrap up for today. But remember, episode 22, we are definitely going to pretend that the research has been run. We've learned a bunch of things. We're going to have to pretend. We're going to make sure we're not the user, and we are going to design a better booking that we think will accommodate all of these different people and their use cases. You'll also notice when we do this next week, I'm not going to open the existing booking. I think one mistake that people make, and I'll say this again next week, is they open up the existing thing and they accidentally end up in the mindset of, how do I make this a little better? And they just kind of move pieces around. We're not going to look at it at all. We're going to ask ourselves, how can we make the absolute best booking system for what our research showed? And again, we're going to have to pretend what that was, but imagine we have research, reports, and insights, and all these things on the artifacts list. What is the best, simplest, no-brainer, just works, totally made sense, didn't need training, didn't need a tooltip, didn't have to watch a video, booking this system can do? So with that, let me load this up to Axure for those of you who like to check out the Axure file. And again, apologies that I promised we'd get into designing this week, but I didn't know how long the fake research planning would run, but we'll definitely get into designing next week. In fact, I've already prepped the page with a couple of reminders to ourselves as we design. Knowledge design. If you want to be super prepared for episode 22 next week, then you want to go watch the knowledge design video on the YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and write Delta CX knowledge design. It was a great episode, and it's really going to put you in the spirit or the mindset for what we're going to do next week. Be your own princess. All right, so with that, I will flip back to streaming software and a giant picture of me and my wispy hair. Steph says, I would love to know how you handle change management if the new solution you will build is super different, but I'll ask next week. Also, that might apply more to tools used on a daily basis than booking holidays. Yeah, my short answer to that tends to be, Change is always a little bit bumpy for people, but I find in general that when the change is perceived as an upgrade, there's an initial, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, that was easy, that was better. Oh, cool. And so I tend to think of it that way, though again, people aren't necessarily using this on a daily basis. And then we've got Whitney saying, thank you, Debbie. We appreciate you running through this. Well, sure. I'm also curious, and even though we didn't have this in our research plan, I'm also curious if you call the Disney Vacation Club and you speak to a call center representative, what does their system look like? I wonder if there's something that the call center system uses that is better, faster, easier, could be translated for the end user. I'm curious. We hypothetically in our research, we should see what they're using, and then we should see if we could make theirs better. Wahahaha. Manuel says, thanks. We appreciate you doing this. Of course. Happy to help. So next week we're going to pretend, let's put up we're going to pretend that we did our research. We're going to pretend that we know things. We're going to have to make them up and do a lot of pretending, but we're going to make sure that we are not the user. We're going to make sure that in every moment we imagine that there is a real research insight that is guiding us and not just, I think it would be better like this. We want to make sure we're not saying that. That's not UX. I think it would be nice is not UX. It has to be our research found this, and so I'm building this because I understand that problem and I'm solving that problem. Nadu says, thank you. I will go watch Knowledge Design. Yes, everybody, please watch Task Analysis and Knowledge Design. We're going to use our Knowledge Design next week in big, big ways, because if you watched episode 20 last week, you know how complicated the Disney Vacation Club is, especially for newbies. And we have to make sure that this system makes sense to the newbie. We have to make sure that the person who is buying into the system today and sees the website for the first time tomorrow, next week, where they go, oh, this was easy. This just made sense. This totally makes sense. I barely know the DVC. I just got here, but this makes sense. So cool. All right, I'm going to play us out of here. But first, I'm going to remind everybody that we've got some cool shows this week. Remember, tomorrow is Office Hours Ask Me Anything with special guest Jeremy Kriegel. Now, he's going to be here for the evening my time, 6:30 p.m. Italy time. So get those questions ready. But once a month, I do 2 office hours in one day to accommodate other time zones. So I'll also be here live at 10 in the morning Italy time. I'll be doing that one alone. And then join me at 6:30 p.m. Italy time with Jeremy. No shows on Wednesday and Thursday because I'm doing my Transforming Toward Customer Centricity workshop. There are still seats if you would like to sign up. Just go to the deltacx.com website, go to training, go to Transforming Toward Customer Centricity. And then Friday, critical thinking stream as always. And again, please, all of you know somebody who wants to learn UX and for free, and hopefully in English. So please tell your friends, your coworkers, your managers about the Delta CX YouTube channel as a resource to help people working in CX and UX at all levels, at all stages of their career, including managers and leaders. We are now over 5,000 subscribers, and I need all the help I can get getting the word out. So thanks to everybody. Be safe, be well, and I'll catch y'all tomorrow, twice. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are